This week I'd like to talk to you about the Harleston property market and the roller coaster of the last decade. The 2010s, the tens, the teens. I'm not sure what we are supposed to call the decade that has just gone. No matter what it was called, the last decade was a tough one. So does it really matter that we never really got around to giving it a name? Some might say, whatever one calls it, coming to an end is the most fundamental job any teen, and I refer to all humans, could possibly do. The last 2 decades have certainly been tumultuous. At least for this decade we have just started, we can say in a few decades' time things like, "That style is so 20s," and fellow humans will essentially know what you are talking about. If you come of age in this decade, you will be a 20s child, and we will discuss 20s politics and 20s style and all the things that hadn't been created on the 31st of December 2019. The time that 2 nameless decades ended, and how finally there was something everyone in the UK could agree on: the name of the decade. Hey, it's a start. So what has happened to the local Harleston property market in the last nameless decade? Well, the average Harleston property has risen in value from £177,600 to £282,900. That's in the last 10 years, meaning each Harleston homeowner has seen a profit of £202.50 per week for those last 10 years. Rolling the clock back to the start of the last decade, January 2010, and the economy and housing market were recovering from the credit crunch and the worldwide financial crisis. A decade on, and things feel a little different. If you bought a Harleston home over the past 10 years, things have certainly changed. Harleston property values rose 59.3% on average over the last decade, yet taking inflation into account, they only rose in real terms by 26.3%. Compare that to a 42.5% rise in the 80s, a 13.2% drop in the 90s, and rise of 62.8% in the 2000s in real terms. So, in real terms, after inflation, there has been less of a house price growth in Harleston in the past decade than the previous one. On average, 1.12 million homes were sold each year throughout the last decade, although that was 26.4% less than the decade before, i.e. the noughties, when an average of 1.52 million properties were sold annually. So, what are the underlying issues in the Harleston and wider UK property market when in real terms property is 26.3% more expensive than a decade ago? Whilst the newspapers tell us first-time buyers can't get on the housing ladder and the housing market is in gridlock, what is the problem? Well, I am a firm believer in the adage, bad news sells newspapers. And because the truth is something completely different, as 32.7% of homes last year were bought by first-time buyers, compared with only 22.8% in 2009. Yet there are still issues, mainly a persistent lack of not building enough new homes, which curtails the supply and choice of property, but stagnated wages, stiffer mortgage rules, and homeowners not moving as much as previous generations, all contributing to the problem. In the UK, the number of homeowners who moved in 2009 was around 14% higher than in 2009, yet this was still just under 50% lower than the average for the noughties. It's all up and down like a roller coaster. So my thoughts for the future are based primarily on what will happen to interest rates. Throughout the last decade, the Bank of England base rate was half of 1%. That was at the start, and that was then cut to 0.25% in the summer of 2016. And even with the increase to its current level of 0.75% in the summer of 2019, it has made borrowing money very cheap indeed. Nonetheless, bank mortgage rates will rise again, and I am concerned about the effect upon the housing market. Now, it won't be as bad as previous times when mortgage rates went up in the 1970s and 80s with the mass repossession, because the tougher mortgage rules introduced in April 2014 will have ensured borrowers were stress tested on their affordability if interest rates shot up. Most borrowers have been stress tested on their affordability to mortgage rates of up to 6.5%, which would obviously squeeze household disposable incomes, yet stop people losing their homes due to repossession. Whilst I'm not giving advice, just personal opinion, if you are one of the 29.3% of homeowners who isn't on a fixed rate, maybe you should seriously consider doing so. The 2020s will be an interesting decade, and if you want to be kept up to date with what's happening in the Harleston and the wider UK housing market, and also including this, follow me and this blog to read similar articles to this one. So that's all this time. Look forward to speaking to you soon. If you do have any queries, please let me know, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.